baby? Let's go. Welcome back to another fantastic, lively, fun, energetic, and anticipated episode of OC and TJ. It's your boy, Colin O'Callahan. Welcome back with another playoff episode. And if you may have missed it, the wild card weekend has long been gone. It is now time to move on to the second round, also known as the divisional round. The winners of these games will move on to the conference championship, while the other teams will unfortunately have their season come to an end. But before we predict what is to happen, let's talk about a few coaching moves that took place over the last week or so, beginning with the Dallas Cowboys, who have officially parted ways with Mike McCarthy after 5 seasons. Dallas is now in search for their third new head coach in the last 5 or 6 years. So I'll just give you my thoughts. I think it was the right time to move on from Mike McCarthy. Clearly, you weren't really getting the results that you wanted from him. 6-win season the first year, then 12-5, you get bounced out. Next year, get bounced out in the second round by that same team, the San Francisco 49ers. The fourth year, you get blown out in the wild card as the second seed in the NFC to the Green Bay Packers. And then the final year, you miss out on the playoffs with another 7-win campaign. And I know that there were a lot of injuries that kind of derailed the team from where their true potential was. But at the same time, even before the injuries, they were getting off to a horrific start. They kept getting blown out at home, and it was too little too late before this team could really get back into a groove. What I have an issue with was how they fired him, because his contract expired sometime last week, if I'm not mistaken, and the Bears, who had let go of Matt Eberflus earlier in the year, decided that they wanted to request an interview with Mike McCarthy. And he was still under contract with the Cowboys. And the Dallas or Jerry Jones, for some inexplicable reason, declined that request. And a few days later, or not that long after, they end up firing him. And apparently, it had something to do with contract negotiations or, the length of a contract extension. But according to Adam Schefter, not only did they not even come close to it, apparently it wasn't even discussed. So that is just very, very, ballsy from Jerry Jones. It's really low class. And it just goes to show that no matter who they decide to hire, as long as Jerry Jones is control of football operations, this team is never going to win anything, because he's deluded into the fact that they could still compete for championships when in reality, the offense hasn't really lived up to expectations. The defense, dramatically regressed from last year. And, when Dan Quinn was in charge. And, the football moves that you made over the past years, they don't do anything in free agency. They usually wait until the draft. And then when it's time to give their top guys the big dollars, they wait until the last second and they completely panic and throw these guys everything that they want. It happened with Dak. It happened with CeeDee Lamb. It happened with Ezekiel Elliott in 2019. And it was about to happen with Mike McCarthy, but Jerry Jones, at least came to a senses, if you even want to go to that point, and said, you know what? It's time to move on. Let's go in a different direction. A lot of the rumors say that they might hire Deion Sanders as their next head coach, but I don't know how that's going to work out for multiple reasons. The first is that he's still under contract with the University of Colorado. Apparently, it's a $10 million buyout. So who knows if the Cowboys even want to go through that process to hire him as the head coach. But two, and more importantly, you got two alphas that want control of that locker room, that want control of the roster and control of the team. And, when two alphas clash, it's not going to work out. And it's just gonna cause even more turmoil and more frustration, and that has a negative effect on the players, because they're the ones putting their bodies on the line out there on the football field. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, if they're smart enough, if Jerry Jones is smart enough, he'll actually put his pride and ego aside and hire somebody that will be a difference maker and a culture changer. But if I know any better, it's probably going to be Kellen Moore. Or you know what? They're probably going to go outside the Bucs Jim Irsay style and just hire Jason Witten. A guy that has no coaching experience whatsoever and just, completely sucks his first season. That's what I'm expecting. But let's get into some more positive news here. The New England Patriots hired Mike Vrabel to be their next head coach. the former New England linebacker who won 3 Super Bowls with this team is coming back, 17 years later since he departed from the team to be the successor to Gerard Mayo. Here's my honest opinion. Am I happy with the hire? Yes, obviously, because when you look at his success with the Tennessee Titans, taking them to a conference championship in 2019, winning Coach of the Year in 2021, when they had, just a godload of injuries, on both sides of the ball. And then, a lot of, postseason appearances, reviving the career of Ryan Tannehill, developing an all-pro running back like Derrick Henry. Same thing with A.J. Brown and Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry and those boys. So Mike Vrabel has a very impressive track record. And even though the last 2 years in Tennessee did not end well, one of the biggest reasons why is because, A lot of the big players left. They traded A.J. Brown to the Philadelphia Eagles, and it wasn't his decision, and it got the GM fired. And then when the new guy came in, Rand Carthon, there was a power struggle, and both sides just decided to move on amicably. And then Tennessee decides to fire the guy that wins the power struggle just this past offseason. So it just goes to show how much of a dysfunctional organization the Tennessee Titans are. So, Mike Vrabel stepping into New England can definitely make a boatload of difference, especially with how bad of a disaster it was when Gerard Mayo was in charge. But at the same time, having said all of that, the only problem I have with Mike Vrabel as the head coach is who's going to fix the offense. That's my big thing, because I wanted to hire Ben Johnson. In retrospect, I may have been a little bit exaggerant about it, because I wanted somebody that was going to help Drake May get in the right direction, somebody that was going to modernize this offense. But at the end of the day, this is who the Crafts wanted all along. They knew that Vrabel was going to be their guy, and they wanted to go through the process. By the way, it was just flat out disgraceful with what they did, but I'll get into that in just a minute. I wanted somebody that was going to have a more modern mind, someone that was going to be more creative, but that's the thing that I really hope Mike Vrabel addresses. And he's been on record saying that, in his introductory press conferences and some of the radio interviews he's done since then. If they bring back Josh McDaniels, I don't know if that's really the best solution, because A, it's his third stint, and 2, I just think he's not really the bright mind that he used to be when he was with Tom Brady. It'd be nice if we could get some flashes of what happened in 2021, but I feel like his offenses have already been figured out at that point. So I just hope that, Mike Vrabel does a very conductive search in that regard, and, picks somebody that has his fair share of offensive knowledge. If it's Todd Downing or Tim Kelly, I'm going to give up on the season, because I know I'm not going to get any freaking progress whatsoever. But if I had to grade the hire, I'll give it a B+. I like that Mike Vrabel is back. I loved him as a player. He helped us win 3 Super Bowls. He was a freaking beast as a linebacker. And it sucked that Tom Brady's last game as a Patriot had to be against Mike Vrabel, when he was coaching the Titans to an AFC championship. But, I don't think anybody in Foxborough hates Mike Vrabel. I think they're going to welcome him back with open arms. I think they already did so. I watched the press conference. You could tell he was extremely excited to be back. But again, the whole process of how they hired him in the first place was just a freaking travesty, because really they interviewed 4 guys for the job. They requested to interview Aaron Glenn, but he declined that because I think he knew his chances with that team were not going to be great. But here's the thing. One of the biggest rules that an NFL team has to comply when it comes to hiring a head coach is they have to satisfy the Rooney Rule, which means they have to interview at least one African-American head coaching candidate and give them at least an opportunity to, give his thoughts on why he should be the next head coach of the team. Well, the Patriots did that, but the 2 guys that they chose in charge were Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton. 2 guys that haven't been in football, or at least in the NFL, in the last 3 seasons. Try telling me that you're only interviewing these guys to satisfy the Rooney Rule without actually telling us you're doing that. That is just flat out shameful and flat out, disgraceful on behalf of the Kraft family because, yeah, maybe if you did actually think you'd have a shot of getting these two guys, or if you actually were interested in their qualifications and what they were able to do in the past, Pep Hamilton, he was in Houston a few years ago. He was the offensive coordinator with Jim Harbaugh in Michigan in 2017. Had a decent season with Wilson Spade and Brandon Peters. Okay, I'll give you that. But really, to me, that was just flat out disgraceful, the fact that you only interviewed those two guys to satisfy the Rooney Rule. And I know the Crafts haven't admitted that or haven't been on record saying that they did that, but that's what it felt like to me. But you know what? At the end of the day, like I said, I'm happy with Vrabel being back, and I'm hoping that we do a lot in free agency and in the draft. Apparently, he's going to get the final say when it comes to roster decisions, which, thank God, we don't have to deal with Elliot Wolf and Matt Gross freaking BS. But they have to go all in when it comes to free agency. They have the most cap space out of any other team in the league. They got receiver issues. They got O-line issues. They don't have a pass rush. Their run defense took a really big hit with Jawan Bentley being out for the season with a torn pec. Running back, you might have to consider a Ramondre Stevenson replacement because he's had a lot of fumble issues. They got to do everything they can to give Drake May a legitimate roster and a legitimate supporting cast, or else his career is going to go down the tubes just like Mac Jones did a few seasons ago. I know both of them are two completely different quarterbacks with two totally different styles, but when it comes to developing quarterbacks, the Patriots have not been the best at it since Tom Brady left. That's all I'm going to say. All right, now let's jump into the playoff previews. Let's begin with Saturday afternoon's matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans. Chiefs are obviously the number one seed, so that means they're coming off of a bye, while the Houston Texans are coming off a very stunning and convincing wildcard victory over the Los Angeles Chargers, 32-12. Where the hell has this been the whole season? Now it's time. Now you decide to play to your freaking potential. I mean, great. You did a great job. You gave Justin Herbert the worst performance of his entire career. Your offense didn't completely wet the bed, and your defense played out of its mind. I mean, who knows? Maybe playing Saturdays on the wild card is actually a great thing for this football team. You know what? I got to give my hats to the NFL schedule makers for that. Defense was absolutely fantastic. I mean, Justin Herbert, he completed less than 50% of his passes, threw 4 interceptions, won a pick 6 late in the third quarter that completely turned the whole tide of the football game around. And the thing was, the Texans offense wasn't even that special. I mean, they were okay. They had a lot of positive moments. C.J. Stroud threw over 280 yards. Joe Mixon ran for 106 yards. Nico Collins, 7 catches for 122 yards, but only 2 touchdowns. 3 turnovers, should have been 4 if Derwin James didn't drop an interception in the end zone. 8 penalties. But the thing was, they didn't kill the football team. I mean, if you look at the final score, 32-12, you could tell that they at least did the bare minimum, which was get off to a fast start, late in the second half, or late in the first half, I should say, and then put it away in the fourth quarter. They were down 6-0 after, the offense fumbled the football on their opening possession. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh my God, here we go again. It's going to be another predictable and painful defeat for the Houston Texans. And it's one that we all saw coming. But then the Chargers just fizzled out from that point on. I mean, Justin Herbert, he started the game going 7 of 11 for 78 yards. He finished the game after that, since then, completing 7 of his next 20 passes. I mean, that is just flat out inexcusable. I know that Quentin Johnson had a lot of drops, and, the running game wasn't a huge factor in this ball game, but the only source of life that the offense had was Ladd McConkey, because he had close to 200 receiving yards on 9 catches, and on 3rd and 26 in the fourth quarter, he split the defense for an 86-yard touchdown, and then right after that, on the extra point, not only does it get blocked, but it gets scooped and scored for an extra 2 points by the Houston Texans. So instead of the Chargers being only being down 23-13, they're now down 25-12. And I'm just thinking to myself, oh, okay, they have no chance of coming back, because Houston's offense is just going to control the time of possession, which they did. They held on to the ball for 34 minutes. And unless Justin Herbert finally got out of his freaking way, then I don't know if the Chargers were going to have any chance of coming back because, yeah, there were a couple drops that Justin Herbert would have, loved to get back that led to interceptions, but nobody could excuse the pick six, and nobody could excuse that freaking arm punt that he had on his final pass attempt of the night, to Derek Stingley Jr. So the Texans defense was flat out hellacious. Give D'Amico Ryans a ton of credit for, getting them in the right spirit. And also, you got to give Rex Ryan a little bit of love because he's the one that said that the Chargers had a bye week when it came to the Houston Texans. And they used that as fuel. They used that as motivation. And C.J. Stroud, just trying to play smart 500 football, did enough to get the job done. So give credit to the Houston Texans, but unfortunately, I think their season is going to come to an end against Arrowhead State at Arrowhead Stadium against the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones, they're both going to be good to go. They are the hearts and souls of their respective sides of the football. And as long as you have those two guys on the football field, then I think that's all it's going to take for the Kansas City Chiefs to win this football game. They have a way better offense. They're more consistent. They're more efficient. They're more dynamic. They have the better quarterback. They have the better play caller. And as solid as Houston's defense has been all season long, it can only do so much if their offense just continues to stumble, especially with the limited arsenal that they have. No Tank Dell, no Stephon Diggs. Joe Mixon was on the injury report with an ankle injury. The O-line is a freaking disaster. So really, you need C.J. Stroud to have the game of his life for the Texans to have any shot of winning. That's the only thing it's going to take for me. But I'm going to say that the Kansas City Chiefs, they do enough on both sides of the ball. They control the time of possession. They're going to dominate in the trenches. And they're just going to make the least amount of mistakes. That's just what it comes down to for me. So give me the Kansas City Chiefs 30-13. I don't think it's going to be that close at all. I hate to say it, but like I said, it's going to take a miraculous performance for C.J. Stroud for them to finally get over the second-round hump. All right, next up, we got Saturday Night Football between the Detroit Lions and the Washington Commanders. Number 1 seed versus number 6 seed, but I don't even think the seedings do this game any justice because the Washington Commanders came off a very, very exciting victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to a walk-off San Gonzalez field goal. They won that game 23-20, and it was the only exciting game that we got the entire weekend. And I really hate saying that because I love the playoffs more than anybody else in the world, but that's really, I can't lie here. I mean, this was the only game that lived up to expectations. Jaden Daniels was flat out phenomenal. I mean, let me pull up my notes here for just a quick second. He went 24 of 35 for 268 yards, 2 touchdown passes. He only had 36 rushing yards, but he went 8 for 15 on third down. He was 3 for 5 on fourth down. But the thing was, they were down 17-13 early in the fourth quarter because of 2 failed fourth down stops. And it looked like Tampa, after getting off to a promising 10-3 start, Tampa Bay's offense finally came to life. They were moving the ball extremely well. Baker Mayfield was throwing dimes and stiff-arming defenders on freaking quarterback scrambles. Bucky Irving was taking over in the running game. Mike Evans was torching Marshawn Lattimore throughout the entire first half. And I'm thinking, all right, Tampa Bay's up by 4 points. Their defense finally got a stop inside the 5-yard line. And, all they really needed to do was just march down the field, get another touchdown on the board, and they could put the game away. But just 4 plays after that fourth down stop, Jalen McMillan comes in motion. It looks like he's going to take a jet sweep, but Baker Mayfield doesn't hand the ball off in time. Either Jalen McMillan ran too early or Baker Mayfield handed it off too late. Either way, the ball fell on the ground. It was a loose ball. It was a fumble, and Washington recovered it deep in Tampa Bay territory, and it came down to another fourth down try for Jaden Daniels to get his team back on the board with the lead, and he did so successfully by finding Terry McLaurin in the end zone to give the Commanders a 3-point lead. Tampa Bay ended up getting the ball back. They marched deep into the red zone like they did throughout most of the night, but on 3rd and 1, Graham Barton snaps the ball a couple seconds early. The rest of the offense can't get to the play in time. They hand the ball off to Bucky Irving, and he goes absolutely nowhere. And they have to settle for a game-tying field goal instead of going down the field to score another go-ahead touchdown. Jaden Daniels got the ball back with more than 4 minutes left on the clock. And like he did throughout the entire night, he just threw dimes. He converted on a couple big third down plays. He milked off as much time off the clock as possible. And all it took was a 37-yard field goal from Zane Gonzalez to put on the finishing touches. So here's my take on the whole game right there. Both quarterbacks were phenomenal. I think both offenses were virtually unstoppable throughout the entire night. Yeah, Tampa Bay punted a couple times in the first half, but they tied the game up at the halftime. They took the lead in the third quarter, and all they needed to do was get another score on the board to put it away for good. But that fumble was the biggest difference in the ball game. You know, you don't turn the ball over, you'll have a better chance of winning. Who knows what would have happened if, Jalen McMillan didn't fumble that football, if they just ran another play and it only got like 2 or 3 yards. But Tampa Bay's chances of winning would have been a lot better than what it was when that fumble did take place. So give Washington credit. They made the most out of their opportunities. Jaden Daniels outplayed Baker Mayfield. He's clearly cemented his case for Offensive Rookie of the Year. And honestly, this might have elevated him to, being a top 5 quarterback. I'm not going to go there just yet, but Jaden Daniels is a freaking superstar. And he is by far the most dangerous quarterback to go up against in the NFC. I'm not going to go so far as the NFL because you got Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen in that discussion. But Jaden Daniels is sure as hell making his case. So I don't think this game against the Detroit Lions is going to be a cakewalk at all. I think the Lions will win. I think that their offense is going to be just as amazing and just as prolific as Washington's is, but it really comes down to defense. I think that both of them are going to be on their heels throughout the entire night. Detroit's, because of the injuries. Washington because they don't do well against the run. And, you saw it against Baker Mayfield. They definitely had their issues, in the secondary. So I think Detroit has a well-oiled machine on both ends. You got Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery back in action. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta and Jameson Williams. You got one of the best O-lines in football you got to go up against. So really, you just have to make sure that Jared Goff has a turnover-laden performance for Washington to have a shot. Because if you do, the Jaden Daniels is going to make you pay. So that's my big take on it. But I think the Lions will win. They're at home. I think their offense will, just make a few more plays down the stretch. And really, more importantly, I think it just comes down to their defensive intensity. I mean, if they could shut down Sam Darnold a couple weeks ago and hold him to 9 points, I think that they can at least do enough to get a few stops against, one of the hottest quarterbacks in the entire conference. So I think it's going to be a really close game. I'm not expecting, a lot of punts. I'm not expecting a lot of stalled out drives. But really, just like the Tampa Bay game, one turnover, one slight mistake could swing the entire momentum of the ball game around. So I'll say the Lions win this game 36-29. I'm going to go with a little bit of obscurity there. So we'll see what happens, but it's going to be an amazing game. It could really go either way if you ask me. So, let's move on. Sunday afternoon, we have a rematch. We have a regular season rematch between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Los Angeles Rams. LA is coming off a convincing victory over the Minnesota Vikings, 27-9. It wasn't really because of the offense, even though they were extremely efficient in the first half and at least did the bare minimum of not turning the ball over at an alarming rate. But their defense carried this team from start to finish, if you ask me. 9 sacks against Sam Darnold. 9. 6 of them were in the first half, and they forced 2 turnovers. One of them is scoop and scored that completely put the game out of hand in the second quarter because, they were Minnesota was only down 10-3. And then Ahkello Witherspoon hits Sam Darnold on a blitz. The ball comes out, and Jared Verse, who is definitely a leading candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year, runs it all the way for a touchdown to put LA up 17-3. And at that point, I'm saying, oh my God, here we go again. It's just a replica of what happened last week. Sam Darnold kept seeing ghosts. He held onto the ball way too long. It felt like he was predetermining every single drop where he wanted to go with the football every single time he dropped back in the pocket. And by the time he realized that the first read wasn't there, the pocket collapsed, the pressure got to him, and he just couldn't make anything happen. And if you ask me, if the Rams had any semblance of an offense in the second half, the score would have been a lot worse. Because in the final 30 minutes, they committed 7 penalties. They had 6 first downs, only 101 yards of offense, and they only made it into the red zone one time. So really, all it took was their defense playing out of their minds, collapsing the pocket against Sam Darnold, holding Justin Jefferson to 0 catches in the entire second half, and shutting down any semblance of a run game for them to still win that game handedly. I mean, I snoozed in the middle of the fourth quarter just because of how boring it was getting and how, LA's offense kept fizzling out while Minnesota's was getting shut down. That's how bad it was to me. So Philadelphia, on the other hand, they are coming off, they're coming off a promising victory over the Green Bay Packers, 22-10. To me, it wasn't really so much about their offense. I mean, listen, they capitalized off a lost fumble on a kickoff to start the game. Jalen Hurts stood in the pocket, found an open Jahan Dotson to take an early 7-0 lead. And then in the third quarter, Dallas Goedert just stiff-armed his way and, bullied through everybody to get a 24-yard touchdown and put the Eagles up 16-3. But, I mean, bottom line was, to me, it didn't speak about Jalen Hurts being rusty. I saw a tweet about this from Dan Orlovsky on Twitter. If you saw the game tape, nobody was getting open. I mean, Jalen Hurts only threw for 131 yards. A.J. Brown got targeted 3 times, only got 1 catch. Devontae Smith, he had a decent game, 4 catches for 55 yards. But if they didn't have Saquon Barkley, and they probably would not have won by 12 points. But the thing was, A, they ran the football a lot better. B, they didn't turn it over. C, they dominated the time of possession. And 4, more importantly, they just made the least amount of mistakes. I mean, their defense from start to finish was the biggest reason why they won this football game. The only reason why the Packers even had any chance of coming back was because of Josh Jacobs by having an angry run of 31 yards to cut their deficit to 6 in the fourth quarter. But Jordan Love, he threw 3 interceptions. You had that fumble on the kickoff that gave Philadelphia an early 7 points. And they were 1 for 3 in the red zone, and they committed 8 penalties. Really, it was more about the Packers self-destructing than it was the Eagles winning that football game, if you ask me, because Green Bay had plenty of opportunities to, pull off another 7-seed upset like they did last year against the Dallas Cowboys. Their defense was playing tremendous. They try to get as many stops as possible. And yes, they did give up a couple of touchdowns that, gave Philadelphia more and more life and more momentum. But all you had to do was just, play careful, mistake-free football. And unfortunately, they couldn't. It took perfection, and they couldn't get it done. So that's the bottom line here. This game is going to be taking place in Philadelphia, unlike SoFi Stadium like it was last time. And to me, I think the X factor is just how you're going to be able to run the football, because both teams have not been able to pass it well over the last few weeks consistently. Ever since that explosion against the Buffalo Bills, that Rams offense has not done a really good job. They showed a lot of stretches of it last week against the Minnesota Vikings, and then they just shut down in the second half and didn't really do much of anything. The Philadelphia Eagles, more or less, did the same thing, but, they got Saquon Barkley in there, who's the best running back in football. So that's what it really comes down to me. I think that the Philadelphia Eagles, are going to play hellacious on defense. I think that they're going to make a lot more plays in the secondary than I think the Rams will. And 3, and more importantly, it just comes down to Saquon Barkley for me, because if you can torch this Rams defense the last time, who's to say that he's not going to do it again in his own house? I think it's going to be low scoring. I think both defenses are going to do everything they can to keep their teams alive in the game. But like I said, it just comes down to A, running the football, B, the physicality, and C, just how both quarterbacks are going to operate. Each of them have dynamic threats at wide receiver, but it just comes down to, those 2 or 3 plays in which, you have to, put the team on your back. So I'll say the Eagles win in their own building, 20-10. All right, and last but not least, we have the game of the weekend, the Baltimore Ravens versus the Buffalo Bills, the two leading candidates for MVP going head-to-head in a winner-go-home scenario. Buffalo is coming off a 31-7 demolition victory over the Denver Broncos. They were down 7-0, and they were only up by 3 at halftime, but a doink field goal pretty much swung the entire momentum of the game around, and Buffalo went on a 21-0 run in the second half to win that game handedly. But the bottom line was they were just a way better football team. They had an incredibly balanced offense. Josh Allen was tremendous. He had 272 passing yards, a couple touchdown passes. But really the biggest reason why I think they were able to win this football game was because they ran the ball for over 200 rushing yards. James Cook was tremendous. They had 120 yards. They were 8 for 15 on third down. They picked up 26 first downs. They held onto the ball for 42 minutes. And really, if it weren't for a few stalled out drives in the red zone, I think the score could have been a lot worse. But I'm not going to nitpick there because I think Buffalo was almost near perfect throughout the entire game. And if it wasn't for a blatant no call on Patrick Surtain in the end zone that could have given Buffalo an automatic first down, the Bills might have won 41-7. Probably even bigger because after that opening drive where Bo Nix threw a dot to Troy Franklin from 43 yards, their offense just couldn't get anything going, especially in the second half. 4 first downs, 63 yards, 0 for 4 on third down, no semblance of a running game. And after that, after the first half, Bo Nix only completed 5 more passes for 42 yards. What else are you supposed to do with that? And the play calling was just flat out predictable because Denver tried to force the run, even though it wasn't going anywhere. And by the time they said, you know what, maybe we should just put the ball in our hands of our quarterback, it was too little too late, and they couldn't get on the board somehow. So Buffalo was just a more physical, more dominant, and just a way better football team. And really, it was just about handling their business and avoiding the trap that they did last year when they played against this Broncos team on Monday Night Football. The Ravens, more or less the same thing. They didn't have Zay Flowers, and it didn't even matter because by halftime, they were up 21-0 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And despite a couple of moon balls thrown by Russell Wilson, they had little to no weight on the outcome of the football game. Lamar Jackson had, 175 passing yards, 81 rushing yards. That's 256 total yards from scrimmage, along with a couple touchdown passes. And they ran for 300 yards. 186 of them went to the king, Derrick Henry. They were incredibly balanced from start to finish. In the opening drive, they go 13 plays for 95 yards in just over 7 minutes to take an early 7-0 lead. And Pittsburgh just completely laid an egg. It looked like they didn't even want to be there. Only a few guys, bothered to even show up. Baltimore held onto the ball for 40 minutes, only committed 3 penalties, 10 for 15 on third down, 3 for 4 in the red zone, while the Steelers only picked up 11 first downs and didn't get any points on the board until they were down by 21 points both times. 21-0 to start the third quarter, and then 28-7 when Baltimore pretty much put it away. So I think both teams know that whatever happened in the wild card game was expected, but this one is where they're going to really have to lay it out on the line because whoever wins this game could potentially beat Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship if Kansas City, predictably advances for the 8th straight season since Patrick Mahomes has been the starting quarterback. So we can talk about, the defenses have to step up. The supporting cast has to do this. The coaches have to make sure that they prevent this from happening, this or that. We all know that the two guys that are going to be featured in the spotlight are Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. And it's not because that both of them are going to be the top 2 choices for MVP, but it's because they have 2 of the biggest chips on their shoulders when it comes to postseason success and legacy, because Lamar Jackson has 2 MVPs. Josh Allen has been a transcendent quarterback, a multiple All-Pro, and he definitely should have been at least considered to win at least 1 MVP. But neither of them have been able to get to that Super Bowl and beat Patrick Mahomes to get there. Josh Allen had 3 chances, didn't win either one of them. Lamar Jackson had a shot last year in the conference championship, completely blew that one. So both of them are going to need to put their teams on their backs. They're going to have to play near perfect for them to win this football game, because we both know that this is going to be an intense grudge match. Nobody is going to relax whatsoever. And also, more importantly, this is not going to be the blowout that it was in week 4 when those two guys saw each other for the first time at M&T Bank Stadium. Josh Allen has it in his house. He's got it under his terms. And now you got the 2-time MVP wanting to make a statement. So it's just going to come down to who wants it more. Who wants that edge? Who wants that battle? Who wants that matchup more? And really, more importantly, who wants that ring on their finger? Because I believe that whoever wins this game can beat Kansas City in the conference championship. That's just my personal gut, and I feel like a lot of people would feel the same way. I think Lamar definitely needs it more than Josh Allen for the simple fact that he's got those 2 MVPs under his belt. But you can make the argument for Josh Allen as well, because A, he hasn't been getting the respect that Lamar has gotten throughout his entire career. And 2, if Josh Allen beats Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, he's going to win the championship. There's no doubt about it. And I think you could say the same thing with Lamar Jackson, depending, who they go up against in the NFC. So when it comes to a winner, this is where it gets really difficult. On one end, I can pick the Baltimore Ravens because A, they already beat them before and blew them out 35-10. They've got the best running back in football and the most dangerous quarterback, or one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in football. Their defense has been tremendous over the last month or so, especially since they moved Kyle Hamilton back to safety. They're number 1 in the league since November 11th, since their 18-16 loss against Pittsburgh. And, Buffalo's defense, it's just, I hate to say it, it's not that great right now. So I think Baltimore has that going for them. But with Buffalo, not only do you have Josh Allen, you got a tremendous prolific running back in James Cook. You got a bunch of weapons that could really attack Baltimore's secondary. You got Amari Cooper and obviously Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox. You got the best offensive line in football, who's given up the fewest sacks in the league. And even though Buffalo's defense isn't the best, it is still a sturdy unit. And it's well coached enough to the point where they know what they have to do against their biggest competition. So you definitely could say that, especially since Baltimore doesn't have Zay Flowers. So that's my thing. And the Bills have home field advantage. It's a toss-up if you ask me. Yeah, this is really hard. I think both quarterbacks are going to do everything it takes to win, but you know what? This is definitely the hardest decision I've had to make on this show so far this season. But I don't know, man. I don't know. This is going to take me a lot longer than I thought. I think it's going to be a great game. It's going to go to overtime, in my opinion. But I think who did I write down on my notebook? Baltimore. Yeah, I think that's what it's going to take because Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, better defense, Justin Tucker. Even though he's had a down year by his standards, he's still the most accurate kicker in NFL history. He's going to the Hall of Fame. He's arguably the best player in his position in NFL history. It's going to come down to the very end, but I think the Ravens do just enough, 27-24. They're favored by 1 point, which is flat out surprising, but at the same time, they already beat Buffalo earlier this year, and they just have a lot more pieces than Buffalo. But it's going to be an amazing, fantastic showdown that I don't think anybody's going to want to miss. It could be 27-24. It could be 33-30. Heck, it could be a low-scoring bout like it was in 2021 when these two teams played each other in the playoffs, and Buffalo won that game 17-3. It could be that, but yeah, I could absolutely be wrong, and I probably will, because when you ask Josh Allen to take his game to the umpteenth degree, you don't want to go up against him. That is a damn fact. But that just about wraps it up for another episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content, and let us know who you think is going to win this weekend, and who will be moving on to the conference championship games. Does Kansas City face a stunning upset, or do they, predictably move on and potentially go to another Super Bowl? Let us know in the comments. Have a great rest of your week. And, we'll see you all next time.